All right. Okay, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about problem solving. And problem solving, like I mean that in a bunch of ways. So we've got a bunch of different topics I want to talk about today. First of all, I want to talk about production safety, and this is like things that your production should be doing to keep both you and the audience safe. Some de-escalation techniques. These are really kind of some of the techniques of influence and like how to utilize the right technique at the right time to be able to de-escalate situations, especially when you're in situations with disagreeable guests or other kind of problem scenarios that arise. Three, I'm talking about creating a container. So this is about creating healthy boundaries for getting into and getting out of character, and really making like a space that is going to contain the experience that you had during the interactive theater or the LARP or whatever it is. And then aftercare. So emotional processing, like after we get out of these, role-playing scenarios, what are the techniques for debriefing that we can use in order to process our emotions about them? All those things are important. So it's a lot of topics that we're going to cover. So, and then once we're done with that, we're going to move into a little bit of practice. So we're just going to like putting it all together, all the different things that we've been practicing over the last several weeks, putting it all together with just like some simple structures of like, go get a water bottle from a guest kind of thing, things like that. So first, let's talk about production safety. So the fundamental thing here is really about consent. Consent is the foundation for good play, and we need to get consent in order to be able to have good experiences with people. So when trying to gain consent, your production should be using the 3 C's, which are calibration, communication, and check-in. Calibration means like setting expectations and learning what boundaries may actually exist for players. And this includes, in my opinion, having onboarding, like having guest onboarding where the parameters and the rules of the experience are explained, both in like emails and things like that communicate these things ahead of time, but also when guests arrive, there should be an out-of-game space where people are onboarded, explained kind of what is about to happen, given the parameters and rules, and then given a little bit of help getting into character. Communication, so creating a shared understanding of safety. So having different communication mechanisms, I'll talk about like what the different tools are to create good communication on your stage. And then check-in, systems for checking in like actually during play to make sure that consent is still had by everybody involved. So I want to talk about, first of all, physical safety. So I think your production needs to have clear rules and expectations for physicality. So what is the expectation of contact with performers? This should be reinforced upon guest arrival. It's not enough to say it in the email. You have to say it to people again and again. You have to like drive this home. Your production should also state what the repercussions are for crossing these boundaries. And the repercussions should be you get a warning, depending on the severity of it. You get a warning and then you get kicked out, or you just get kicked out. Like don't touch people without their consent. Don't know how often we have to say this. Your production should also have some safety staff or security staff that can actually enforce those consequences and boot people out when they've crossed the line. You also should have the right to walk off at any time. Like your production is like, no, stay and try to entertain guests. That's a huge red flag. You should always have the right to walk away as a performer. And everything immersive has these different categories for contact. So most experiences are in this industry at this point have some sort of expectation that they set up ahead of time for guests about the level of contact. And these are the categories that everything immersive uses, and I think they're pretty good. So that's no physical contact, light, which is kind of like a business or acquaintance level of contact. So like shaking hands or touching on the shoulder or something like that. Moderate, which is like familial contact, might include like hugs or like holding someone's hand. Aggressive contact, which is like pushing and grabbing. Extreme contact, which might be stress positions, like a high level of physical activity. Non-sexual contact, simulated romantic contact, that might be like snuggling or canoodling and holding hands. Simulated sexual contact, that could be anything from a technique called Arzamandi to like people actually kissing to people dry humping, all kinds of things are possible. So this should be outlined both for you as performers, so you can know what you're actually getting into as a performer, as well as for your audience, so that they have a good, clear understanding of what the parameters are. Safety gestures. I love to have these safety gestures for use for actors on stage. So the first one is just a sign language, American Sign Language C for check-in. So you can check in and then somebody can give you a thumbs up or 2 thumbs up for like, I'm great. Kind of like an equal sign for like, I'm okay right here, but don't go any further. A thumbs down for tone it down, or like this is a warning, or an X for stop. So these are really helpful things where if you're having a scene with someone in an improvised scene and you're not sure if they're having a good time anymore, and like, you know, their character's really upset and crying and you're not sure if they're upset or if it's just their character, you can check in. That person can be like, I'm having actually a great time. Like my character's weeping, but this is the best thing ever. So, or that person can be like, no, full stop. And it's like, okay, cool, let's get this person off stage. Let's make sure that this is not going to happen. You can also just throw these gestures out during improvised scenes to let people know like where you're at. Like, let's say you're having an improvised scene and somebody says something that's over the line, that's not a direction you want to go. You just thumbs down, like that's not the direction I want to take this interaction. Cool, now they have that understanding and you can move on with your scene. Verbal safety. So most productions, I really advise having verbal phrases to be able to communicate out of scenario. So these are things that you can say on stage that let your fellow performers know that you're communicating something real that's happening. So speaking frankly, I really need to go use the restroom. You know, speaking frankly, like I have somewhere I need to be right now. Speaking, you know, something that lets the people know that your character is saying this, but you're communicating something that is a real out-of-game need. And it's not an emergency. These are just like communication tools for, you know, the kind of out of scenarios phrases. Or really, like, I really can't chat right now. And like that signals to your fellow performers while not letting the audience know like what's going on. You should also have a safety phrase to pull somebody off stage. So this can be any kind of like safe word or keyword that's going to let people know, it's not going to fit into their normal phrasing, but it should, and it you know, fits into the world, but you can use it so that you can pull somebody off stage, but it's not going to alarm guests. Like if it's an emergency to the performers, but maybe not to the guests. So, hey, I have a message for you from the headmistress. Can you come with me? Then that way that performer is like, oh yeah, absolutely. Comes with you off stage. And then you're like, okay, listen, this is the scenario that's unfolding. I need you to know about it, blah, 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 whatever it is. Just a phrase to be able to pull somebody off stage, to be able to communicate with them something that you can't communicate in front of guests. Or the tigers have escaped again. Can you come with me and we can sort this out? And then they're like, oh yeah, again, oh, and see you guys off stage. So it's something, it can be anything that fits your world, as long as it's something that's not going to come up in like regular parlance. I want to talk about some de-escalation techniques. So again, I'm going to give like a warning about ethics here, because a lot of these de-escalation techniques are based on the 7 principles of influence. So these are psychological things. Like there's our psychologist who did a whole bunch of research about how people are influenced, and he found that again and again and again, there are essentially just 7 different techniques that people use in order to influence other people. Ethics, we only want to use these things for good, and creating benefit and growth and positive things. So please do not use these for evil. One of those first principles is the principle of reciprocity. So people like to help people who help them. So you can make an appeal to reciprocal action. Like, would you help me if I help you? So being able to get people to agree or be more agreeable that way. Consistency. People like to be consistent with what they said who they said they are and what they said they value previously. So if you can get that commitment upfront about somebody, about their values, then you can make an appeal to those values. Would you say that you're a fair person? Would you say that you're a reasonable person? Would you say that you're a respectful person? Great, then I'm sure you'll agree that you want to let me through there, because that's the only thing that seems fair in this scenario. And since you said you're fair, that's fair. So people like to be consistent with what they have said previously. Social proof. People like to do what other people are doing. So you can appeal to the social group in order to help influence behavior. So, you know, one person may be disagreeable and you move to the people around them, like, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Get their friends and family. That social pressure will soften them a little bit and sometimes get them to stop doing the behavior you don't want. Authority. People like to listen to experts and be experts. So when we're talking about an appeal to authority, we're actually talking about status, right? And in this scenario, we want to give the guest status, because if somebody's being disagreeable, then often it's because they don't feel as though they have status or have power. So giving them power in that scenario often just completely diffuses any anger or any issue that they have. So, oh, you seem to know a lot about this or how this goes. Why don't you fill me in? Why don't you let me know? And that usually diffuses a lot of situations. Liking. People like people that like them. So there's just an appeal to flattery, like, wow, you are so helpful and so fascinating or so clever or so wise. I'm so glad I met you. This thing, right? I would say here also, like, you can, giving people compliments and noticing things about them is just a helpful technique in general for this type of work. But you want to be really careful anytime that you're making any comments about somebody's appearance. So like, keep it to things that are about, like, you know, the way that they put their outfit together, or like a really cool statement piece of jewelry that they're wearing or something like that. If you're going to make a comment about appearance, keep it away from like instead of like, wow, you're so beautiful, it's like, wow, you've put that outfit together so stylishly, that kind of thing. Scarcity. People like to have things that are in limited supply. So an appeal to scarcity. Hey, can you keep a secret? I can only tell 3 or 4 people what I'm about to tell you. So I need to know that you really, truly are going to keep a secret. Love secrets and mysteries. And then unity. People like to feel as though they're a part of something or that they belong. So you can also make an appeal to solidarity. So I can't do this without you. I need everyone to be on the same page. Can I trust you? Will you join us? So those are the 7 different kind of techniques of influence. And here's some kind of common variables, things that come up frequently that can derail productions or that get in the way. And different tools of these different, you know, de-escalation techniques or influence techniques to help you in these different scenarios. So the first one is investment. Like the player just isn't at all invested. They're just kind of, they're sunbathing, they're watching, they don't seem that interested. First, appeal to flattery, like, wow, you seem really interesting. I'd like to get to know you. And then you drop it and leave it there, right? Appeal to reciprocal action, like, hey, would you be willing to help me if I help you? And then an appeal to scarcity, like, you know, hey, I can only invite like 1 person to this thing. Are you interested? So that helps people with buy-in and investment. Uncertainty. So this has to do with like people not knowing the bounds of play and not necessarily understanding that they're invited or how to join. Like people, they're invested, but they just don't know how to take the step into the pool. So appeal to friends and family, right? Appealing to the group around them to get them to play. A great avenue to get people who are, if people have kids with them in the scenario, use the kid to bring in the parent kind of thing. Like so helpful to actually target the kid initially and then be like, what about your mom? Mom, what do you think? Like, so using the child to bounce that off and then bring the parent in a more real way. appeal to solidarity, right? This feeling of like, well, we need to do this together. So join, get in here. When somebody's disagreeable, so appeal to consistency is a really helpful one here. Like, say that you're a balanced and reasonable person. Balanced and reasonable person, stand in my way and not let me pass. And then that person, you know, wants to be consistent with what they've said, and they are getting the hint that their behavior is not appropriate for the scenario, so they'll start to change it. Also, appeal to authority, giving that guest status. A lot of times people are being disruptive just because they want attention. They just want to feel important. And so if you just give them a moment to feel important and you're like, oh, you know, this guy actually is my boss. He's in charge, so I take orders from him. Right, boss? And that person's like, yeah. And they often just let it go, whatever anger. And if that doesn't work, if those types of things don't work with somebody who's being disagreeable and they get irate, walk away and inform security, because that's no longer a situation that's playful. It's no longer a situation that you should have any business in needing to diffuse or de-escalate. Also, when people get into a mob or a pack, this happens with little boys all the time. Like, they form little mobs, and a really great way to diffuse these types of situations is to appeal to authority. So you ask them who their leader is, and if they don't fall apart instantaneously, then maybe they identify their leader to you. Then you invite others to comment on that person's leadership, right? Oh, why is this person a leader? What do you think? Is he a good leader? What do you think? Is he a good leader? Then even if they get any further than that, because usually the group is like completely fallen apart at this point. But if they get that far, then you appeal to that authority figure in order to diffuse the situation further, right? So this helps with a lot of like, when you get a group of, and it's not necessarily even a matter of investment, it's just a matter of like, there's something that happens in the brain of like preteens and teenagers where suddenly like nothing is cool anymore, and then they're just like, well, I don't care. And so it's a technique to be able to kind of like get rid of the just that like teenager pack mentality type thing that ends up happening a lot of times. Is like, okay, who's in charge? Who's in charge among you? I know that someone's got to be in charge. And if they don't instantaneously start arguing over that, then you have an avenue to be able to actually start playing with them. So those are some kind of common scenarios and common ways to help diffuse them. I will say that it doesn't always work, you know, like sometimes these things work brilliantly and sometimes they just don't work in whatever scenario we're in. You know, read the room. If it's not comfortable, then leave. Leg it. You should always feel free to leave. Now I want to talk about creating a container. So what do I mean by container? So in this type of work, it's really critical to create healthy boundaries. You need to be able to separate the experiences of the character and the experiences of the actor. So interactors need to be able to move into the mindset of the character and then back into their own mindset in a safe way to maintain good mental health. And this is doubly true for villains. Living in somebody villainous's headspace it influences the way that you understand reality. So being able to move into and move out of that headspace safely is important. So getting into character, or what I call enrolling, and then getting out of character, or what I call de-rolling, in deliberate, healthy ways is critical to this process. So I've got some techniques for you to be able to do that. So why is this necessary? Number one, character bleed. So character bleed can be really great when we're having joyous moments or transformative experiences or things like that, but it can also be negative and harmful when it starts to bleed over, when the negative and bad experiences start to bleed over. So it can also be personalization of the events that are happening on stage. So it's blurring the lines between you and the character. Post-game depression. This is a feeling of drop or blues that happens and that can cause emotional weight that negatively impacts your real life. Post-game charisma. This is a feeling of euphoria that can linger, influencing your behavior in ways that can negatively impact your life. So when we say charisma, we're like, oh no, it's a good thing, right? Ooh, it can be a bad thing. make your ego inflated and make you make silly decisions you should not be making. So the first enrolling technique I want to talk about is conscious costume donning. Like as you're putting on your costume, you're doing so with great intentionality. So as you put on the different layers and makeup and maybe a scent that your character wears that you don't normally wear, jewelry, or anything else that invokes the character for you, you're doing so with intention and thinking about each of those pieces and what they mean to the character. Yeah, you're just trying to separate the things that make the character that are different from you as you're putting on your costume. Oh, this character, has this kind of life experience, which is very different from my own life experience. This sort of thing that the character embodies is very different than the way that I choose to live my life. Just understanding as you're putting on each of the different pieces, the differences between you and your character. Character playlists. So I love to create playlists for characters. I think it's a great way to help yourself get into the headspace. And then, create character playlists that remind you of events that have happened in your character's life and that evoke the feelings that the character experiences frequently. And then listen to your playlist as you prepare for your performance. Think about each of the songs and how they apply to the character and not to you. Choose songs that you don't listen to frequently. So this is important because it's helpful to just have that container stay separate. This is a little technique that I developed with my friend Lizzie Stark very recently called carrying our intention. So backstage, you've got a bowl of different gemstones. And before you go on stage, you select a stone and you ascribe, as an actor, you ascribe something to this physical object that you're going to carry with you. So it might be, strength or protection or soothing or whatever it is. You ascribe some intention to it. And you can look up the classical meaning of the stone, like lots of stones have like meanings associated with them. And you can just keep that to yourself and you don't tell anybody. You stick it in your pocket. And then when you're on stage, if you find moments where you're starting to have moments where you feel jarred or where the character is slipping, you just touch that stone and you remember your intention and you put that experience of, into that stone. You just kind of do a little mental jujitsu and like say, okay, I'm going to process this experience later. You take it, put it in the stone and remind yourself that you're going to spend that time with it later. At the end of the day, you take your stone out and you wash it. And as you're washing it, you just think of the times that you touched it throughout the day and spend the time in mentally processing what each of those were. When that's done, you return the stone to the bowl. This sounds like woo-woo magic, and it is woo-woo magic. It works. It's like crazy, but it works. It absolutely works. I think there's something so important about having ritual and having like physical objects that we use in this type of work. Like it truly helps to create that container in a helpful way. Some de-rolling techniques. So this is the opposite of getting into role. Now we have our getting out of role. So our conscious costume removal. So as you get out of costume, you shed the layers of the character, you remove the makeup, you remove the scents, maybe you put your own scent on if you have a scent that's kind of signature to you. Get rid of anything that's the characters, put on your own clothes, your own jewelry, your own things. And as you're doing so, reflect about what you like about yourself that makes you unlike your character. Things that are positive about you that are traits that the character does not share. Also, shake it off after you get out of costume. Literally just physically shake your body. This is also incredibly helpful to do if you've had like an upsetting experience in character on stage. Like trauma lives in our bodies, and it is unbelievable like how much physical embodiment actually helps in being able to like make movement happen. So literally just shaking yourself and until you start to feel more like you, shake the character off. Concentrate on how your body feels when you're holding yourself as you versus how you hold yourself as the character. And just repeat this as necessary until you really feel like you're in your own skin again. Ritual farewell. So holding a piece of the character's costuming, or something that represents them. Speak aloud. This is often done like in a circle with other people, as other people are de-rolling as well. You say out loud something that you like about the character and something you think the character has to work on. And then you say goodbye to the character for now, and you take that item and you place it in the center of the circle and thank the character for what you experienced together tonight. And then you're done. You can let it go. And then a myself playlist. So creating a playlist for yourself with songs that remind you of, critical events and moments in your own life. Listen to that playlist after you're done with your performance and think about each of the songs and what they mean to you and not to the character. And then choose songs here that you do to do frequently, songs that do have like significant moments in your life, important things, like impactful life moments. Now we're going to talk about aftercare. So we've gotten out of character, we de-escalated situations, we've created a healthy container. Now emotional processing. So debriefing is a way to process your onstage experiences constructively. So a good debrief allows participants to spend time reflecting on their experiences, sharing their stories, and processing their feelings. Debriefs serve to enrich the understanding and connect the experience to a lesson, truth, or an idea. It doesn't tell people how to do this, but asks instead for them to make those connections for themselves through thoughtful questions before any exposition is given. So this is not about someone telling you how to understand your feelings. This is about just creating space to validate and ask further questions that help you to explore your own feelings about the events that have happened. So the goals of a debrief are to validate experience, whatever it was. This is a chance for you to just be heard and understood. Process your emotions, beginning to start to translate your immediate experiences into lasting memories, reflections, and learnings. And to gain awareness, so especially if you've experienced something particularly difficult, debrief is an arena for people to become aware of the problem so that you can start taking steps towards solving it. 5 rules of a debrief. Number 1, confidentiality. What is said in the debrief stays the debrief, unless it can be anonymized or if there's like a major safety issue that needs to be addressed. 2, no interrupting. Let the current speaker finish. 3, all experiences are equal. Events may have been experienced very differently by different people, and accept that. Just don't challenge it. Whatever someone else's experiences is valid. 4, the door is open. You can just opt out of anything at any time without having to give any explanation. And if you don't want to talk, you don't have to. And then 5, use the third person. So when talking about something that was done on stage, avoid using the first person. Like, this didn't happen to me, it happened to my character. Externalize that. So avoid using the first and second person. So not I was here and you did this, but my character was here and she experienced this, and then this character was here and he said this kind of thing, so that we're creating that container, maintaining that container as we talk about the debrief. Debrief configurations, you can do this just in pairs. You can do find a buddy and do this, or with a facilitator. A group debrief, in groups with no more than 6, you can do this with a facilitator, just kind of making sure that everybody gets a turn and that you have good circle practice. Communal debrief, this is if you have more than 6 people, then I would absolutely recommend having a facilitator. A group debrief, it's I recommend having a facilitator for these things in general, but you can do, if you start to get used to this sort of format, then you can start to do it with just your own friend group and things like that. Structure for a debrief. I find this structure to be extremely helpful. So high point, low point. First, you talk about the high point that the character experienced, making sure to use that third person language. Mac went here, he saw this, it made him feel really great, Then you talk about the low point, again, of the characters, so using that third person language. So, Mac saw this thing happen, and when he saw that, he was really upset because of this and this and this. Then you speak about your personal high point and low point, making sure to use first person language. So, as an actor, I saw this thing and that made me excited because of this. And then as an actor, I saw this thing and that made me feel bad because of this. So you talk about your own personal high point and low point. Then notice places in which they overlap, right? If you're overlapping in the low point a lot, then that's something to pay attention to, right? Because we're seeing that those negative experiences are starting to bleed. If your high point is overlapping all the time, that happens for people a lot, because a lot of times, like, the most joyous moments for their characters are also joyous moments for the actors, because they're that's not as dangerous or as much of a red flag for us as when we're seeing a lot of the negatives starting to overlap. That's a little bit more like, okay, we should pay attention here. Avoid shaming and blaming, like both yourself and others. Like it's so much more helpful to just look at these experiences as things that have happened and try to avoid trying to place blame or be like, this person did this and like they made me feel this way. It's about what you've experienced and those things are valid. Other debriefing can really just be having a conversation with a director or a trusted friend or your spouse or significant other, or just someone who can hold space for you and validate your experiences without judgment. It doesn't really have to be structured to be effective, but I do think it's super important to do this work. What to look out for: moral hangover. Moral hangover is that when the actor has, through their own role playing, felt their ability for cruel or immoral actions. It's not you. Remember, immoral people don't have moral hangovers. Relationship hangover: feelings, both positive and negative, that were felt for another remain after the game is over. This is very normal. Talking about it is healthy. Social exclusion: if the character was socially excluded or lived with the threat of isolation, that fear of alienation can persist. So it's even more important to be included in debriefs and be included in those communal spaces afterwards. Question? Oh, no. Yeah. Okay, so that's all of the lecture-y stuff I have for today. And now we're going to do some practice scenarios. So work with your facilitator, create a scene in a way that makes sense for your character with all the work we've been doing so far. Use everything we've learned so far. We're going to just spend like 5 minutes per actor on the scene. And I just put a whole bunch of different tasks and things that we can use as jumping off points in order to wrap a scene around this. And then we'll get to practice it together a little bit. So I'm going to pause the recording so that everybody can practice.